statistical, mathematical fact
never has been down.
has broken every single record. There is no asset that has come close.
It's the only thing in the industry that was not touched, that was not hacked, and it never fails doing what it promised in 2009. It's never
What's
failed.
the best performing asset the world has ever seen? And you'll find out that it's Bitcoin.
Welcome, followers. Welcome, X.com followers, supporters. Welcome, traders. Welcome, Bitcoiners. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, haters. Welcome to you all. I just realized that I actually misspelled the title of this talk here, or at least the initial theme of this talk. Our talks always touch upon a variety of themes, so it's quite inconsequential to come up with a title, to be honest with you, but I do like to start with some theme that I kick off our talks with, and today that theme is going to be property rights, in Bitcoin. And I wanted to talk about how those three sort of are converging on each other today. And it doesn't mean that we have to sort of stick to one specific topic, but I do like to start from some central point. I do realize I misspelled the first word, property, but I think I can correct that um, after our talk or whatever. But thank you all for joining me. I'm experimenting with a variety of different times during the 24-hour cycle. I've been doing the last few talks sort of really late from my point of view, from my time zone, and I'm in that Eastern time zone. Some people refer to it as New York time, or Eastern uh, Standard Time, what have you. And so it is just a bit after midnight for me. It's 12:12 actually, and 12:12 in the morning. But good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending upon where you are in the world. And I appreciate you showing up for these things. Those of you who obviously can't join me when I sort of spontaneously come on X.com or Twitter Live, I do want you to know that every single talk of mine does wind up on my Bitcoin podcast called Bitcoin Unleashed. I strongly encourage that you search Bitcoin Unleashed out on all your podcasting platforms. It is on Fountain App, it is on Spotify, it's on YouTube, it's on all of the uh, popular podcasting platforms. And so if you're interested in anything that I have to say, um, that might spark your interest in other topics that I've touched upon. And Bitcoin Unleashed is where you can find those topics. I try to make everything I talk about somewhat evergreen in nature. And what that means is that I try to make sure that what we address here will be valuable no matter when you come back to it. So it is not time sensitive in nature. Wisdom is not limited to certain periods of time. Knowledge might be, but wisdom is not. And I try to keep our topics really deeply rooted in wisdom, which is timeless. And so whether you come back to what we talk about here a year from now, or 10 years from now, or 100 years from now, most of the topics that we talk about, I believe, will be relevant because they are sort of inextricably intertwined to value, and I think that value is timeless um, when you get to the core of what value is, and Bitcoin is all about value. So anyway, let's get to. I don't have a lot of actually don't have a lot of phone battery here, but let's get to property rights in Bitcoin. And then from there, we can go in any direction we like. I can take your questions if you have any. But I did want to touch upon this point because many of your comments encourage me or incite me to go in a specific direction. And over the last few days, I've gotten quite a few comments here connected to real estate and property. And I thought it was a great time for us to revisit this. It's not the first time I'm talking about this here. So if you were to go to Bitcoin Unleashed and just search the, the the topic real estate or property on the Bitcoin Unleashed podcast, you'd find a variety of different talks regarding it. But repetition has a value, and so we're going to touch upon some of those topics again here today. The first thing I think that's very important to understand is that property is a concept. It doesn't have a true, what some people would refer to as a true, distinct individual reality. The property is an idea. It is conceptual in nature. It's a mental construct, if you will, of human beings. In a very real sense, property doesn't really exist. Now, I don't want to wax too philosophical on this because that takes us in down a totally different rabbit hole. And these are rabbit holes that have fascinated me for a very long time, but perhaps they don't fit here with what we're going to talk about here today. But it's important to understand that it is a mental construct, that property doesn't really exist. It is a mental creation by human beings. Now, the second thing I think that's very important to understand is that this concept or this mental construct of what we call property starts with yourself. You see, the first form or the first idea of property comes into existence with oneself. We are born with a body and a being, and that being or that body um, has an existence or a life. And for periods during the human experience, that body or that being did not have property rights. That body or that being that lived supposedly inside of the body, and I do use those words purposefully, supposedly, that being that lived inside of the body, and it doesn't, but that's how most people understand it, did not belong to the individual. That your body or and the being that your body possessed were typically belonged to something else, to someone else, or to a clan or a group or a government or um, what have you. Uh, in the realm where the vast majority of human beings were basically slaves and lived under the direction and the domain of others, their bodies were not theirs. And the beings that possessed those bodies were not theirs. There was a movement in the human experience that began to grow in popularity, to grow in force and power. This movement was the movement of the individual. And this movement of going from a clan or a group or a slave-based system to an individual rights system and this individual movement brought about a newer version of the concept of property. So property um, was largely, the concept of property was largely reserved for the privileged few because there were no individual rights. And devoid of individual rights, the property of the individual, even at the point of birth, belonged to a very small group of elites. A new movement, this new movement that emerged called for lack of a better phrase, the individual rights movement brought about a wider or a more expansive concept of property. And this wider, more expansive idea of property extended to individual rights. I have a body, and that body has rights. I have a being. I have existence. My existence deserves or has certain rights. My body has certain rights. And this movement into this broader, more expansive idea of the individual, which in itself is conceptual as well. This new concept of the individual having an existence, and this existence of the individual having property rights because this individual has a body, started from there. Some might feel that this is not really connected to Bitcoin or your financial existence in any way, but it has every single thing to do with Bitcoin and your financial existence today, because what we call property today is nothing more than the extension of the core concept of property, which is I am. And this concept that I exist, I am an individual, has created the further extension of the idea of property, where if I am, then what I have is an extension of I am, or who I am, or what I am, and that should be bestowed with the same rights that I have. And so I want you to see where I'm going with this, where the concept of property grows larger and larger from a central point of the individual. And so first, it's my body is my property. And then, well, wait a minute. Now my body has a farm. My body lives on a farm. Well, my farm is my property. And on this farm, my farm has cows, and my cows are my property. And so everything stems from this conceptual idea of the individual, right? So the individual is the first point of personal property, and then what is attached to the individual must be bestowed with the same rights as the individual. If I'm supposed to have control over my body and who I am, then what this body has should be bestowed with the same rights. And so there are, in this movement, there are certain factions and certain governments that have decided to honor that movement more than others. So if we take the United States as an example, property rights was far more important than other parts of the world or other governments, right, that were formed, where there are certain governments where they don't really truly respect the individual property right notion like another country like the United States. And therefore, anything that if the individual doesn't have rights, then anything they have doesn't have rights. The United States really is somewhat unique in this way, where they went further from a historical point of view than any other organized group of people ever in the history of humanity. They went further down the path of, well, the individual has rights. And therefore, what the individual has or possesses, those things are bestowed with the same rights. And so today, the United States has stronger property laws, property right laws, than most other regions in the world. And so I always like to attack things from this more historical point of view, because the lineage of how these things have come into existence, I think, is very important to understand. Because if you don't know where they come from, how can you accurately or somewhat accurately project where the trend might be going? You can't project where a trend is likely to go if you don't see where the trend originated from. And so I always like to attack, being somewhat of a history buff, I always like to attack things from that historical point of view. And so all forms of property sort of extend from this ethereal you. It's what you own, what you have, what you possess. Now, governments came into existence in large part because property owners needed to delegate, delegate, delegate protection of their property. So let me give you an example of this, right? So let's say, for instance, there's 10 of us with farms, and well, before I actually go into that, it's very important to understand this, that once you start to develop the concept of the individual, which then breeds the growing concept of property, you then bring in the concept of theft. So I missed this point. This is very important to understand. Let me go over this sequence again. The moment you bring in the concept of the individual, you then bring in the concept of property. Because the individual, the body of the individual is the first form of property. Once you bring in the concept of the individual, you bring in the concept of property. Once you bring in the concept of property, that concept grows to different forms of property, the property that is owned by the individual. And this concept of property begins to grow. What this concept of property does is then bring in the concept of theft, because then you start to create inequalities in the level of property. And so those without property start to desire property. And then you start to create conflict between those who have more property and those who have no property. This brings in the concept of theft. It brings in the concept of violence. So property, in a very real sense, is what creates the divisions, which creates the differences, which creates violence, theft, and so forth and so on. Because the concept of property creates this, there then becomes the need for protection. But if 10 of us have farms, and we need all of our time dedicated to handling our farms, not dedicated to protecting our farms from those without farms, then we might take one of our 10 farm owners and say, John, you're the 10th farm owner. Why don't you do this? We know your family we know that your family needs to be supported. And the only way your family is going to be supported is by your farm producing. We'll take care of your farm. We just need you to be dedicated to protecting all the farms. So now your job is to protect the farms. We've got your farm. We'll make sure your family's okay. We'll make sure you make a good living. We've got your farm. Your farm's not going to go away. We just need you now dedicated to protection. And that concept right there dedicating or um, relegating the job of protecting to someone else because you don't have time to protect yourself. This is what creates government. You understand? And so John becomes the governing body that every other nine farm owners chips in a little bit of what they make to support John to protect the entire community of farmers. And then when John can't do it and it's not sufficient, there's another person they delegate. They're like, look, we'll take care of you. Here's some money. Don't Your family doesn't have to worry about anything. We don't have the time to protect us, but now we need two people to protect us because there's more farms. There's more people who are farming now. There's more people with property. Now we need two people and then three people. And then all of a sudden you have a Congress and you have a Senate and you have a da, 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 da. But the idea of government grows from the concept of property because property needs protecting. And so these protectors are supposed to do it via force initially and then via law. And then and then the law is supposed to be um, adhered to by force, military. And so governments have grown from the concept of property, protecting property, and the concept of property has grown from the conceptual idea of an individual. Now, this might seem to be waxing very philosophical, but I promise you that is very directly tied to your financial life and Bitcoin in particular. You see, this property that grows in size from the individual, then the individual has a farm, and then the individual has cows on the farm, and then the individual has vehicles and equipment to run the farm, and then, and it starts to just grow, right? This property needs protection. The person with the property can't be dedicated to just protecting, he has to be dedicated to the property. So it relegates the protection to someone else. That someone else becomes the politician or the government who is now responsible for protecting the property owners. Okay, you see how it grows. And this process gets to a place where the power starts to flip. You see, the protector of the properties become very susceptible to those who want to steal the property. And so when the payment from the property owners starts to fall short of the payment that can come from stealing the property, that's where you have corrupt government. That is where you have corrupt leadership. And this is a historical cycle for thousands of years that the protector of the property that's paid by the property owners starts to fall short of the payment that comes from those who want to steal the property, or the property itself starts to become so valuable that the protectors of that property see the property itself as more valuable than the payment that they are receiving to protect the property. So they're being paid to protect a property, but the payment is less valuable than the property itself. So that incentivizes the protector of the property to steal the property. I don't know if you follow my drift here, but I'm trying to give you this lineage that always happens. that property creates the need for protection, the need for protection creates delegating, the need to delegate the protection. That delegation of the protection create the delegation of that protection creates government. Then the government or the protector starts to see what is protected is more valuable than the payment received for protecting. And so now the attack is on the property. It's crazy. It's crazy how that happens. I can't even light my cigar here. It's crazy. Follow that path. So the growth of the property, the rising value of the property makes the protectors of the property see the property as being more valuable than the payment they receive to protect it, and they start devising ways to take the property. Now, how have governments taken your property? By a variety of different ways. They start to take it by imposing. The first way they take your property is by imposing a tax on it. Well, we need more payment to protect the property. We need more payment to build more roads around the property. We need more payments to build to have a bigger police force to protect the property or whatever. So we're going to impose a small tax on the property. This is literally a piece of theft of the property. We're going to impose a 2% tax on the property. That means 2% of the value of the property is now not yours. That's theft. But it's always communicated in a way where we need to steal 2% of the value of your property because protecting it requires more now. And of course, you want us to protect it. And then the 2% becomes 4%. And then the 4% becomes 6%. And then the 6% becomes 8% over time. And so the theft of the property is first through imposing an extra cost to protect it, to provide for the property by the people who were delegated to protect it in the first place. And so the first form of theft of your property is through tax. This tax rises over time. Guys, this is historical. This has happened every single time. It's like a freaking blueprint. Do you understand? So then what happens to add an extra layer of theft to this rising tax, this rising theft tax on all of your property? This rising 2%, then 4%, then 6%, right? That is on a starting value of the property. So to turbocharge the theft, they reevaluate the property. So then they say, well, we were taxing the farm at a value of $50,000. The farm, and we were charging an 8% on 50,000, but we have realized that your farm has risen in value. And so it has doubled in value. Your farm is no longer 50,000. It's now 100,000 because we say it's 100,000, and we just double our theft. So we create an artificial rise in the value of the property from 50 to 100 so that the 8% goes from 8% on 50 to 8% on 100. But it's our number. We can create whatever freaking number we want. This is theft of your property. Why? Because of this natural movement from the individual first claiming his body as his first form of property and claiming rights for that body. And then the rights of anything that the body owns should be bestowed on what is owned. Then what is owned needs to be protected. Then the delegation of that protection to someone else, that someone else starts off good protecting the property until the property values start to become so big that the payment to protect it is no longer sufficient to stop the urge of greed to steal the property. If I steal the property, it is exponentially more valuable than the payment I'm receiving to protect your property. And I'm telling you, people, you can't stop this. This is human nature. And the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that Satoshi Nakamoto, in all of his, her, its, their wisdom, built this greed factor into the newest, most superior form of property that solves all of this. It's truly amazing. And I'm going to get to that in just a moment here. I promise. I just, some of these things are so ethereal in nature that it's very difficult to communicate them properly in somewhat of a brief talk. Now, with my traders, we have hours and hours of long talks on these topics. And I have the appropriate amount of time to sort of flesh them out over many, many weeks and many months and things of that nature. And I don't have that privilege here. So I'm trying to do this in sort of bite in sound bites, and it's not totally accurate. It's not totally adequate, to be honest with you. But let me see if I can light this way, guys. Give me just a second here. I hope I'm not confusing you with trying to create this in sound bites. So the property becomes a honeypot. It always does. A honeypot to now start stealing wealth from the property owners. And this cycle will never end. It will never stop. There has never been a solution to it until Bitcoin. You see, what Bitcoin accomplished was, first of all, to dematerialize the property. You see, that which is physical can be confiscated. But what if we were to take what could be confiscated and take it in all of its value to a realm that can't be touched, felt, smelled, even seen, but it still has the value? So what if you could take your farm and make it frickin' disappear? How does someone steal a farm that they can't see? How do you steal a farm, an $8 million farm that you can't even locate? You can't see it. It's not in a specific location. It doesn't have dimensions. You can't touch it. You can't feel it. You can't lick it with your tongue. You can't smell it. Where the frick is the farm? Where is it? You can't take it. The first thing Bitcoin did was to dematerialize property. It's crazy. And many things in our lives have already been dematerialized. And we've gone over these talks many times before. Our music's been dematerialized. When's the last time you've held a freaking vinyl record? My dad used to have, uh, my dad loved the Beatles. He had the vinyl record collection of the freaking Beatles. I listened to the Beatles, guys, my whole adolescent life. My whole childhood and adolescent life, every single day, my dad played the Beatles in the house. Vinyl record. I couldn't even touch the collection. When's the last time you touched a freaking record? When's the last time you've touched a 45, a 45 or a full vinyl record, or even a CD, the more the more advanced version of music? You haven't touched music in years. Some of you've never touched a piece of music. You don't even know what that is. Music's been digitized, dematerialized. Movies. When's the last time I used to run down to Blockbuster to try to get the one of the 25 issues of a brand new movie release they were going to get? I tried to get there before everyone else because it was first come, first serve. Some of you don't even know what Blockbuster was or is. Doesn't even exist anymore. But you do know Netflix. You can't go to Netflix and pick a movie off the shelf. There is none. You don't touch a movie today. You don't see a movie today. You see pixels on a screen. If you touch your television screen, that's not the movie itself. You can't hold it. You can't go to the store and take it home to you like I used to take a movie home with me. You can't do that today. Movies have been dematerialized. I've got 50,000 photos in my phone. I'm speaking to you on a phone with 50,000 photos. I've got 20,000 videos on my phone. I've never touched them. I've never felt them like my mother did my baby pictures in her album. She used to pull out the album, flip through the photos. That's not done today. There's 50,000 photos which I've never touched, never smelt, never seen. They're pixels on a screen, but they give me the same amount of joy. They give me the same amount of value. Our world has collapsed into the digital realm, and property was the last thing to go. In a way, one of the last things to collapse into this digital world is the world of property. And something really interesting happens with the advent of Bitcoin bringing about digital property. It made it, for the first time in the human experience, it made property unconfiscatable. Bitcoin accomplished what has never existed in the human experience. An era, a point in time where property stops being stealable, stops being takeable by force. Every war is about taking property by force. Every war in the world. That's why Bitcoin's called the peaceful revolution. Bitcoin collapsed property to the digital world, but that's not its major accomplishment, because that had started to be done by the internet. Its major accomplishment is that it made it unstealable, unconfiscatable. So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. You see, before Bitcoin existed, there was something called intellectual property. The internet introduced the idea of property that could not be touched, felt, seen, really experienced by the five senses. That had already been in existence before Bitcoin. So there was something called intellectual property, but you could steal intellectual property. This is why a whole barrage of laws came into existence to try to protect intellectual property. That was the name given to digitized property. So Bitcoin didn't create or bring about digitized property, intellectual property. The miracle that it pulled off was that it made it unstealable, unconfiscatable, untouchable by a human being. So now my property has gone to a place where not a single human being can touch it except me. I'm going to repeat that. Bitcoin created the miracle of taking property to a realm that property had never gone to, had never resided in. This new realm, no human being is allowed to touch the property, feel the property, see the property, smell the property, taste the property, except the owner of the property. That it is not stealable, it is not takeable, it is not confiscatable, except the owner of the property has the only right. We as a human species have done nothing for thousands of years but fought for property rights. That's all the human experience is. It's how do I get better and better property rights? And Bitcoin solved the mystery, created the miracle that humans have been searching for thousands upon thousands upon thousands, millions of years, in fact. How do I protect my clan? How do I stop another clan from taking what I have? How do I have this beautiful cave and it protects my clan? But how do I stop that cave from being taken by a more powerful clan that needs protection from the elements? I have all these tools that we spent a lot of time making. How do I protect these tools? Feed my family by killing animals to eat. How do I protect these tools which no one else can make from? How do I protect them from being stolen by people? How do I protect my tractors, my farm, my property, my land, my music, my this, my that? Bitcoin solved the confiscatable issue. It solved the inability to copy intellectual property. It solved the copy problem of intellectual property. So intellectual property was first made intellectual by the internet, but you could copy it. Therefore, we needed a set of laws to protect people from copying intellectual property like music. Once you collapse a physical song on a vinyl record into the digital world makes it easily copyable. So music went to the digital realm and became intellectual property, but you could copy it more easily in the digital world. Bitcoin comes along and solves the copy problem. You can't copy Bitcoin, which is the ultimate representation of digital value, digital property. You can't copy it. The first time in history, the first time in the human experience, you can't copy it. And also the first time you can't steal. If you can't copy it, you can't steal it. Well, that's not true. You can't copy it, but you also can't steal it. Bitcoin is unstealable. You can't confiscate it, you can't steal it. If you do it right, you can't. And so Bitcoin, having solved this, becomes the ultimate store of your property. Why would you want your music to stay as a vinyl record when now you can make your music invisible, untouchable, unseeable, unfelt, just hearable, but now it can't be stolen? You can make it digital, you can collapse it into the digital world, you can dematerialize it, which takes it out of the hands of people, and you can make it uncopyable and unstealable, unconfiscatable, but at the same time retain all of its value. This is total control now of your property. This is what we've been searching for all of this time. And so now, looked at properly, Bitcoin becomes the ultimate property. If Bitcoin can hold every form of property, every one, better than the older forms. Why would you not collapse it into Bitcoin? If a stock can be printed again by the board members of the company, and you don't want that to happen, why would you not just move that value into something that can't be printed by a board or by other people, and that it would retain the value of that? So the value of my stock is $2 million, but it can be they can print more of it. They can dilute it. They can steal the value from me. They can create an inflation rate on. So why don't I just move the 2 million to Bitcoin where none of that can exist? It can't be stolen. It can't be taken. A man can't touch it. A human being can't influence it. There is no inflation rate tied to it, and there's no tax on it. They can't steal it from me via tax. They can't touch it. They can't see it. There's no dimensions to it, so they can't find it. They can't put their hands on it. When people understand that, when over time the growing number of population understands that whatever I consider a value or my property, if I move it there, it's in the safest place in the world. When people start to understand this, they're going to start moving all the value they have placed in their different the value under my mattress that's going into Bitcoin, the value in a hole in my backyard that's going into Bitcoin now. I'm dematerializing it into Bitcoin. It's safe there. My stocks, 90% of it, I'm cashing out of it. I'm putting the 90% of the value into Bitcoin, because 10% because I like these companies. I know the owner, this and that. They give me perks. I like them. All right, fine. It's like gambling. I like to gamble. I know I'm going to lose, but I like to gamble. Okay, fine. 90% goes to Bitcoin, 10%. I like to gamble. Nothing wrong with that. This brings us to real estate. Real estate has become one of the biggest scams of all, because real estate or has co-opted this concept of property rights. So somehow every time you speak the word property, you automatically now think of real estate. This is wrong. And it shows the effectiveness of the scheme or the scam played on the masses. So property in terms of land, we're going to land property, real estate. This was never for the masses. Never in the history of human beings was land ever made available to the masses. The availability of land, or what's called real estate, to the masses is a very new experiment. This experiment is what? Let's see, 50s, 80 years old. It's not even 100 years old. In millions of years, it's not even 100-year-old. It's not even a 100-year-old experiment where the elites say, let's sell the idea that the masses can own our shit. that let's sell them the idea. Let's give them the notion that they own something. But we know that they don't own it. Let's sell this like hotcakes. Let's put our machine behind this idea that the masses can own our land. Biggest scam in history. Because 99% of people who claim that they own something, they don't even have possession of the deed. Think about that. They can't show you a single document that proves ownership. which is the deed in most countries, right? You don't have the deed to your property. I know how many people are here? There's a percentage of you who own property, and not a single one of you. How many people are here? Not a single so-called property owner listening to me right now owns the deed, can show us the deed. That's an owner. Every single one of you who owns property, you pay rent. You pay rent in the form of a mortgage, and you pay rent in the form of taxes. And you will pay, even if you pay off the exorbitant debt that the real property owners burden you with, you will pay forever a rent for your property with the title of owner. Oh, yes, you'll have the title of owner, but you'll pay rent until the day you die. And if you passed their property, I know you're going to call it yours, but if you pass their property to your children, they will pay rent until the day they die. That's ownership. Bitcoin says, move that shit to me, and I'm not going to charge you anything. In fact, I'm going to make it go up in value every 4 years. And you don't pay me a single thing. There's not a single tax. I don't reassess the value and charge you more. There's no mortgage on me. But there is a guaranteed hike in your value of your property every 4 years of your life, and every 4 years of your children's lives and their children's lives forever. I am telling you, people, the world is only now starting to get a very small glimpse of this. The same way back in 1995, they started to get a tiny glimpse of the internet collapsing physical things like books. You know, I've got thousands of books on my phone and my Kindle. More books than my mother was an assistant librarian. More books in my mother's library on my phone today. Books have collapsed into this. They become a different form of property, a different reality, which means that they can be more. Property can be more when it's Bitcoin. Books can be more when it's digital, dematerialized. Music can be more. You have more music in your phone today than you ever had, if you're my age, in the form of a collection of CDs or 8-track tapes or cassette tapes or vinyl records. It's always more. There's more email than physical letters mailed. There's always more when you go to this world. There's when your real estate's going to be more when you move that value to Bitcoin. Stocks are going to be the stock value to more when you move it into Bitcoin. Everything that gets collapsed into the digital realm of property, the dematerialized realm of property, is more. Never in the history of the world has the digital or dematerialized form of something not been exponentially more than the physical form that it replaced. So there's more digital music than physical music. There's more email than physical mail. There's more streaming movies than physical movies. And there will be more Bitcoin than gold. Gold is $13 trillion. There's going to be more value in Bitcoin than 13 trillion. Way more. But Bitcoin is not just digital gold. Bitcoin is digital property. And what's digital property? What's property? Everything. I start people off by trying to get them to understand Bitcoin as just think of it being a digital gold. So think of digital email versus physical email. Digital email is bigger, right? And they say, yeah, Oliver, yeah, I see that. And then I say, okay, well, think of digital music, streaming music versus vinyl records, right? More digital music? Yeah, Oliver, I see that. And I say, okay, well, think of cassette DVDs and VHS tapes in your living room versus streaming movies on Netflix and Amazon Prime or whatever, more digital movies than physical movies, right? Yeah, Oliver, I see that. So I walk them through this like this, right? Yeah, Oliver, I see that. All right, well, think of an analog phone on the wall that you used to have to dial, pick up and dial with the cord attached to the phone on the wall, right? That's an analog phone. Now think of a digital phone today, iPhone, whatever. What's more valuable? Oliver, of course, is the iPhone. Okay, and I walk them through I said, okay, now think of physical gold, right? You can touch it and feel it. How much is that worth? 13 trillion. Okay, now think of the digital gold. That's Bitcoin, right? I see that, Oliver. Okay, well, if the physical one is 13 trillion, then how much? What should the digital, remember all the digital ones? Yeah, Oliver, I remember they're always bigger. So if the physical one is 13 trillion, what's the digital one? Well, Oliver, it's way more than 13 trillion. Okay, you get that. A little bit more than 13 trillion? No, Oliver, a lot more than 13 trillion. All right, well, okay. So I want typically, I'm sorry for being crazy with this, man. My kids have always told me, Dad, you stopped growing up when you were like 15. And I'm like, no, I stopped growing up when I was like 10. But anyway, I'm sorry for being silly like that. But I hope I'm driving that point home that the dematerialize is never not exponentially bigger than the physical that it replaces, right? So if Bitcoin, even in the example that it's just one property. See, because gold is property, right? One property, 13 trillion gold. And we have already established that the digital or dematerialized version of that one property at 13 trillion should be exponentially more than 13 trillion. And Bitcoin today is 1 trillion. Then where should it go? Just based on that one property law, it should it go to 13 trillion from 1 trillion to 13? Is that a 13x? No, you bozo. It's exponentially more than 13 trillion because the analog phone didn't the iPhone didn't just go to the value of the analog phone and stop. The digital emails didn't just go to the amount of physical mail and stop. The digital music didn't just stop where the physical vinyl record stopped. It's exponentially more. So if the physical form of gold is 13 trillion, the digital version today is 1 trillion. Then should it just stop at 13 trillion? No, Oliver. Then where should it go? Way past 13 trillion, Oliver. So we're way past 13 trillion with one property. Now, what if I told you that Bitcoin represents all property? Do you see where I'm getting at, people? I take newbies down the path of one property. I walk them down the path just like I did now. Music, email, movies, and a variety of other things too. Then I do gold, and then I walk them right into, and they give me the answer. Way more than 13 trillion, Oliver. Where's Bitcoin now? 1 trillion, Oliver. So where's it going? Way past 13 trillion, Oliver. Is that a big gain? Is that is that life-changing gain? Yes, Oliver. They give me the answer. But there's only a few, you're the few, that I even take it further. I'm taking it further than that now. What if I told you Bitcoin is all property? I just showed you one at 13 trillion. What if I said that most of investment real estate property is Bitcoin? Do you know what the investment real estate market, the global investment? I'm not talking about the houses you live in, what you use as an investment. You know how big that market is? That's like 200 trillion. We just went from a 13 trillion. What's the value of gold? 13 trillion, Oliver. What's the value of investment real estate? 200 trillion, Oliver. Now let's add that to the mix. Now, if I'm right and Bitcoin is should represent that, then where is Bitcoin going now? To 200 trillion? No, Oliver. Where should it be going? Way past 200 trillion, Oliver. You see, this thing starts to become stupefying when you approach Bitcoin from this idea that it is property. It is going to collapse all forms of property that we're trying inadequately, by the way, to store your value. We now have Bitcoin that can do it better. And so, what if a big portion of all of these inadequate properties just start collapsing into the better property? What if a real estate guy says, why am I freaking? I've got 8 rental properties. I've got this beautiful mansion on the mountain. We're not talking about the beautiful mansion my family and I live in. I got these 8 rental properties. I'm freaking constantly dealing with repairs. I'm dealing with rare wear and tear. One of my properties is in this hurricane zone. Sometimes I've got insurance on them. I'm paying taxes. They keep reevaluating the value of the properties and the taxes go up. I've got some bad tenants. I've got lawyers trying to get the bad tenants out. I've got some tenants that haven't paid me in 8 months and I'm trying to get them out and they refuse to pay me. My lawyer's telling me it's going to take maybe 2 years to get them out. My They're wrecking the property. I can't do anything about it. I've got another property where they want to build a freaking US Postal Service and they want to take my property, which is fine, but they want to give me a price way below the value of the price via eminent domain. I'm dealing with that bullshit. Like, why am I got to travel around? I got to travel and visit these properties. And if I don't want to travel, I got to hire a management company. Why am I dealing with this? Why don't I just sell this bullshit and just move it to Bitcoin? Physical property collapsed into the digital form, which we already established is always exponentially more. So the value of that real estate in that scenario, the person says, I'm selling it all and moving it to Bitcoin. It's not based on what has always historically happened. That digital version must be exponentially more valuable than the physical version he sold. Is this a pipe dream, guys? Have I gone off my rocker? Tell me, talk to me. Is this stupid to think this way? I would say that if you dare say that, that history doesn't, you don't have history on your side. I can show you where that's happened every single time, but you can't show me where it hasn't happened. So I think I have the better view. I have the better prediction because I have proof, and my proof is 100% that the digital version is always exponential, has always been exponentially more than the physical version. And you can't show me one instance where that's been wrong. So if you dare tell me, Oliver, you're off your freaking rocker, I know you're just speaking from your little feelings and not from fact. Fact is on my side. History is on my side. You have never owned anything except Bitcoin. You don't own Bitcoin if you have the ETF. You're just hitchhiking a ride. If Bitcoin is the Ferrari, Bitcoin, you're just hitching a temporary ride in the Ferrari, but you're going to have to get the fuck out. That's not ownership. That's hitching a ride in the Ferrari. Bitcoin's the Ferrari, right? But you is not your Ferrari. So at some point, you're going to have to get the fuck out of the Ferrari, right? That's what ETF ownership is. Can I hitch a ride? We want to be Ferrari owners. Forget hitching a ride. ETFs for some people, I get it. I don't want to go down that route, but I want to make a distinction between these things here. You have never owned anything in your life. It is arguable if you've ever owned your body. There are laws, even in the freest country in the world, that says that you don't own your body in the freest country in the world. In the freest country in the world, the United States, there's a war going on right now in legal courts, in the highest courts of the land, whether you own your body or not. Is it against the law to commit suicide, to ask for the death of your body and the abortion, this and that? There's, it's not clear. Basically, it is unclear whether you own your own body in the freest country in the world. And that's your primal form of property. You've never owned anything in your life. So if you don't own your body, then anything that your body has, like a house, do you own it? If you don't own the body, then the body that supposedly owns the house, you can't own that either. You don't own the deed, you pay rent for it. That's the biggest scam. It's really ours. We can take it anytime we want to. We're going to charge you rent forever. We're going to tell you what the value is. We're going to increase the rent that we charge, but we're going to give you the label of ownership. Bullshit. That's not land ownership. That's a scam. You can't take it with you. Okay, if this is my property, I want to move with it. You can't move with it. You can't even move to a different state, a different region, a different. Like, how is that property ownership? Really? How do we buy into that bullshit? Oh, yeah, it's yours, but you're still going to have to pay me forever. And by the way, I can take it when I want to. And oh, by the way, you can't move the shit. It's got to stay here. What? We bought that? Our grandkids are going to laugh at us. Do you understand? Granddad, grandma, you guys thought you owned something you couldn't really move, that you had to pay for forever? How could people be that dumb back in the day? You guys didn't understand that Bitcoin's the only thing that you can own because no one can take it from you, and it goes with you everywhere you are. Wherever you are on planet Earth, you are your Bitcoin, that it can't ever leave you. If you have 12 words, your 12 words are your Bitcoin, that you can't leave it anywhere, that no one can take it without your consent, that no one can debase it, no one can tax it. No one can control it. No one can manipulate it. Our grandkids are going to look back and be like, I can't understand how you guys didn't see this. In America, we look back at the Indians and like, I can't believe they sold Manhattan for $215. A pig in a blanket. Really? How? How stupid? That. Every generation's like that, right? They're going to look back on us and be like, you bought into this? I believe that they're going to look back also and be like, people were actually selling this for a piece of paper controlled by some men. People were selling Bitcoin for pieces of paper? Really? But granddad, grandma, how is that? How are people that dumb to sell something this real for pieces of paper? And today they don't exist. But didn't they see this? Didn't they see that it was just a piece of paper controlled by a small group of men, but they traded this real thing for that? That they sold it for that? They sold Manhattan for $200. They sold Manhattan for a pig in a blanket. I mean, we have these stories all throughout history, do we not? How much did the French sell the Louisiana Purchase? Louisiana, a few dollars, whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy, right? Guys, I don't know if what I talked about made sense today, but my idea was that my idea was I hear some people that say they can't hear. I hope I didn't do all this talk for nothing, but my idea was to just kind of talk about how Bitcoin is the ultimate form of property, and to sort of touch upon how the concept, because property is a concept at the end of the day, how the concept of property came into existence. And it was born from the concept of the individual, and the individual is a concept as well, because at its base layer, the individual doesn't really exist. And that's a different rabbit hole, but there is no individual and there really is no property, but we have built these mental constructs. There's nothing wrong with that. But this mental construct called property has been expanding from the property of the body, which you sense that you have, which you don't really have, but you sense that you have, and the rights you want bestowed on that body. And then if the body starts to accumulate property of its own, then you want the same rights that are bestowed on the body to be bestowed on the actual items itself, and how these items have historically been physical in nature. And because of that, they've been grown in value and have become a honeypot for theft, and how Bitcoin has come as the ultimate form of property, as digital, dematerialized property, which can't be stolen, can't be confiscated, can't be touched, manipulated, or controlled by a human being. And therefore, all of the other inferior forms of property that have existed up until now will ultimately collapse into the form, into the better form of property. And so, what are those properties? Commercial real estate, stocks, art, gold. Do you understand? All forms of savings, T-bonds, this and that, they're inferior. And all of that, or the vast majority of that, naturally seeks out what its superior thing is. Everything converges to one. I find so many people miss this concept. Everything converges to one. It doesn't go the other way. Do you understand? So everything starts from one. It explodes to many and goes back to one. That is the story of life itself. From the Big Bang Theory to, the Big Bang and explosion, whether you want to believe the Big Bang Theory or not, from one thing explodes into many, 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 many things, and then gets sucked back into one thing, whether it's the worship of many gods and then back to flowing to the worship of one God, to everything flows to back to one, whether it was like the clan and the civilization back to the rights of one individual, everything flows back to one. And monies can have this temporary period of being in a state of multiplicity, and then all the monies kind of converge onto one. Properties can look like, well, there are many forms of property, Oliver. Yeah, it's temporary because all property converges back into one. Everything goes back to its source. Everything goes back to um, the dirt, to use a religious analogy, right? Everything goes back to its source. Everything goes back to the Father. Everything goes back to the beginning. Everything goes back to its original point. Everything becomes singular again. And so all properties, because of the ineffectiveness of money, properties have had to have this state of multiplicity. So because my money is broken, I got to put a portion of it here. Stocks, I got to put a portion of it here. Commercial real estate, I got to put a portion of it here. Government debt, I got to put a portion of it here. In the bank, I got to put a portion of it here. That's because the shit is broken. But when it's not broken, it converges back to one thing. That one thing is Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is going to call back all of that value into itself. I sold all of my gold. I was a gold bug my whole life. My father was a gold bug. So I got it from my father. My whole life, I primarily worked for cash and gold. I had a gold stash in various locations. My biggest stash, my biggest physical gold stash was in London. Now, here's the weird thing. Not weird, but here's the silly thing. And it seems silly to me now. I never saw my gold in London. I got a piece of paper that said I had it. I got reports, quarterly reports on the value of it, other pieces of paper. But I never really touched it. I never went there and saw it. And if I did, who says they wouldn't just change the name on the cage of the gold? Oh, wait, Oliver Velez is coming. Take Mr. Johnson's title down and put Velez's name up there. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Who says that? Who says that's my goal? Who says it's really there? Who says there's about Who says there's $13 trillion of gold above ground? How does anybody know that? How is that not a made up number in the first place? Where's the records? Show me the audit and who's the auditor? And the auditor, if you show me the auditor, it better not be your sister or your brother or your uncle or anything like that. Let me be the auditor. Nobody knows. But I sold all of my gold. And I'll tell you a really interesting story about this sale, right? It took me months to get my money. Like it wasn't like I could do it Bitcoin, right? Where I could say, I'm going to sell all my Bitcoin and I can do it in a few button clicks, right? Right? Tens and tens of millions, few bucks, few minutes, boom, done. But my goal took many months. The paperwork involved to sell my gold. So the paperwork to sell it and the assurances that I really wanted to sell it took weeks. Weeks, guys, just to get the paperwork in order. And then the double checks. Is it really you? Do you really want to sell it? Is this for real? We need this certified, we need that. We need to insure that. Weeks. All right, now they know it's me. I want to sell it. Right. Then it took months after that. Why? There's no freaking market for it. Not for the size of gold that I had. Oh, Oliver, we're still having difficulty finding a buyer for it. I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me, right? Well, we have a buyer, but the buyer wants this price. So they wanted to rape me. Do you understand? They wanted to force me to sell my gold at such a discounted price that it was a full out fledged raping of me. I'd accumulated this gold for decades. Now I want out and they want to rape me on the way out. Oliver, we can't find buyers for that size, but there, and I'm saying, you got to be freaking kidding me. I can't get a buyer. There's nobody in the world. You're telling me, well, there is a buyer, but we'll take it at this price. And I just began to see more and more the scam in all of this. I was angry. I finally got out of it. Now, I'll add more context to that story. My traders know this. They know the story. They lived it with me. I went blow by blow with them during the process. So anyway, this it's crazy. So Bitcoin at the time, I think was 18,000. It was 18,000. It had touched 19,600. So it was 18,000 when I made my first request. I remember it had a little dip, right? It had a little dip, maybe back to 16,000 and change. Then Bitcoin just freaking ripped. And I'm like on edge, man. When are they going to get this done? I want to put my gold into this. All right, now we're at 28,000. This is at the end of 2020. So remember I told you I sold it in 2021, but I started the process in the latter part of 2020. So I finally get this done, right? Gold had gone to 64,000. Do you understand how angry I was? I started the process of selling my gold at 18,000. It went to 64,000 and I still didn't have the sale done. Not all of it. I am livid. Thank God that China decides to ban Bitcoin mining. The SEC approves the first futures-based Bitcoin uh, spot ETF, but not spot ETF, Bitcoin futures ETF. All of this kind of helps lead to a Bitcoin drop, a decent one, the first one, and I was loving it. 64 all the way down to 28 and change. Bitcoin starts coming, and I'm saying, this is my opportunity. All right, it's not 18, but still. So to make a long story short, I get the vast majority of my gold sales between the price of 38 and 42. So Bitcoin had come off of the low of 28 back to to 38 when I started. Okay, now I'm putting my proceeds from the gold in from 38, and I got it all in between 38 and 42. And then Bitcoin continued to rise to an all-time new high of 69. So I just want to know, I want you to have a sense of where I did this in the whole overall cycle of Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin had its bear market, I was under water with my gold purchases or conversions into Bitcoin when we dropped to 15,600, 500, something like that, or whatever. But that didn't matter to me. But I should have been in at 18,000, 18, 20,000. And that whole thing, guys, I dedicated so much of my life to accumulating this property called gold and realize on the exit, they were just trying to rape me, trying to take me, trying to delay me. Was it really mine? Did I ever see this piece of property? No. I had a piece of paper that said it was mine, but I didn't get treated like it was mine when I wanted to leave. And it exponentially upped my respect and appreciation for Bitcoin. Because there is no man with Bitcoin. There is no piece of paper. There is no person there trying to rape you. And my appreciation for Bitcoin went through the roof. And my disdain for gold, despite being a gold bug my whole life, went through the roof as well. Crazy, right? Crazy story, guys. Crazy story. All right, let me see if you guys have any questions. Yeah, Huddleside says, yes, but the amount is not known. Also, supply rate increases as demand increases. That's right with gold. So nobody really knows. This is a fake number. Do you understand, people, when it comes to gold? It's fake. First of all, nobody knows how much. How do you know how much is really mined over the past 6,000 years? Are you telling me there's accurate records for that? So when I see gold's value at 13 trillion, look, I was born early in the morning, but I'm not stupid. Nobody knows. It's a made up freaking number. And even if you feel you have, oh, we've got gold in the safe back here, have you ever drilled through it? Have you ever tested it? How old is that gold? And when's the last time someone's looked inside of it? What if it's fake? It's found, fake gold is found every single month of your life. Fake, counterfeit, sitting in some vault for hundreds of years. Oh my God, it's fake. Guys, I'm telling you, it's a farce. It's a farce. There's nothing anybody can tell me about gold. And what Hodl side is saying is correct. You know, all you got to do to get more gold is just dig deeper. That's it. It's not like it's finite or anything. You just dig a little deeper. It's more expensive to dig deeper. So gold at 2000, maybe the price is not high enough to dig deeper, so people don't dig anymore. But let that price go to 3,000, and you will get people digging way deeper than they have, finding way more gold. And there's a saying in the commodities business. I've been in this business for 4 decades, right? There's a saying in the commodities business. The solution for a higher price of a commodity is a higher price of the commodity. I'm going to repeat that because some of you should write that down. The solution, I've been in this business for 4 decades, and this is a common theme for 4 decades. I've heard for 40 years. Do you know what the solution to a higher price of a commodity like gold? The solution to a higher price is the higher price, which means the higher price will automatically bring the price down. Why? Because the higher price solves the higher price issue by creating more supply. What is not profitable at $2,000 an ounce is profitable at $3,000 an ounce, which fires up more mining. More mining creates more gold, which brings more supply of gold on the market, which brings it down from 3,000 all the way back to 2,000. The solution to a high price of a commodity is the high price. This doesn't apply to Bitcoin. The solution to a high price of Bitcoin is a higher price. It's the other way. So, for instance, if you want, let me give you an example of how the solution to a higher price of Bitcoin is a higher price. So, let's say for nobody selling more Bitcoin at 52,000, let's say. No one else wants to sell at 52,000. Well, if you're a buyer, in order to get Bitcoin and no one wants to sell any more at 52, where do you have to go? Down or up? You got to go up. So maybe somebody's willing to sell at 55. And if no one's willing to sell at 55, you raise your bid. Maybe someone's willing to sell at 60. So you have to keep going up to find where someone's willing to let go of their Bitcoin because you can't get it by mining more. It's the only commodity that doesn't fit that model, where a higher price brings more onto the market, a higher price brings zero onto the market. You've got to raise your price, buddy. If they don't sell it at 65, maybe they'll sell it at 80. If they don't sell it at 80, you got to raise your price to 100. If they don't sell it at 100, because you're only going to get it by raising your price. You're not going to get it by mining more. Powerful. You understand? Powerful, guys. Insane, actually. Right. Crazy. Um, what else here? Anything else? Yeah. What is this? I don't understand why this comment. I'm not going to comment on other things here, but let me see if there are any other comments on my talk here. Daisy says we're listening to what you're saying. Okay. What if you have your property? I think opt out is asking. Oh wait, let me just take this first one. Mark is saying, Oliver, do you still own stocks or are you all in on Bitcoin? I do still own stocks. I own, let's just put it this way, I own a lot. I own a lot fewer stocks now that I'm in Bitcoin, but I've owned stocks for decades, guys. So my oldest position is Eli Lilly. I have, McDonald's from the 1980s. I have Microsoft from 1994. I've got Apple from 1997. I've got Amazon from 2003. These are big, big positions. They're family heirloom-like positions, and they have been more rapidly dwindled down in the last 3 years than in any other time in the last 30 plus years. And so they are waning down. And so as I peel off those legacy positions, that those peeled off amounts are going straight into Bitcoin. And this is what I'm saying. I'm not the only one doing this. I'm not going the first one to do it. I'm not going to be the last one to do it. And so as people start to come out of their older forms of property, where do you think they're going to shove that into? They're going to shove it into Bitcoin increasingly so. This is what I've done. This is what I continue to do. All of my gold was peeled off. It went into Bitcoin. A big percentage of my Apple and Amazon was my largest two positions. A big percentage of those have been peeled off and gone into um, uh, Bitcoin. I am now peeling off Nvidia from 2010, guys. And that's the stock of the world right now. Peeling that off, going into Bitcoin. All of my traders know this. They've been with me on this journey. And it's going there. And so the coffers of Bitcoin just keep growing while the coffers of everything else keep shrinking. And this is going to happen. The Olivers of the world that are doing this are only increasing by the hour, by the day, by the week. They're starting to come in droves. They're starting to do the work and they see the numbers. They're starting to get this. And it's only just beginning. And so I'm going to say this last thing and then I'm going to let you go. The main crux of my talk here today is when you start to look at Bitcoin as the ultimate property, and then you start to define what are the existing properties, what has been deemed as properties before Bitcoin, and you realize that a big percentage of those potentially will collapse into Bitcoin as the better property. You start to look at real estate, you start to look at stocks, you start to look at bonds, you start to look at art, you start to look at gold, you start to look at collectibles, you start to look at every form of property that is inferior to this one. And anything that's physical, we've already established that, is going to be inferior to that which is not physical. We already established that the non-physical will be always exponentially bigger than the physical. And so all of your physical properties are going to collapse into the non-physical one, the safest one, the most secure one, the most global one, the most liquid one. Everyone said the gold was liquid, but it wasn't liquid for me when I wanted to get out, not with big size. That was a lie. But Bitcoin is liquid and it's global. Everyone told me the gold market was global. It wasn't global. Very centralized in 4 spots in the world. It's not global. It's global at the penny ante level. At the pawn shop level, it's global, but it's not global with size. And so when you understand it as the ultimate digitization or the dematerialization of all property, because it's the superior form of all property, you start to see the enormity of its future and how early we are. And its addressable market. One property, gold, is 13 trillion, which means that it's exponentially more valuable than 13 trillion. But what if you say, well, it's just not gold, it's all of them? And we're not saying that 100% of it collapses into it, but a big portion of it does. There's some people that still have vinyl records. There's still a few specialty shops that deal in vinyl records, but it's small. The majority is streaming music. There's still going to be some gold holders for nostalgia, but the majority is going to be in Bitcoin. And so, guys, don't shortchange this. Just because we're early, don't shortchange it. Have some vision. And that vision is going to require some patience. But I will be here. I will never let you let go. You stay close. Let's walk this journey together. All right? Love you guys to death. Go to work. Stack harder. Ciao for now.
Oh.
My name is Oliver Velez, and I am your 13%er Bitcoiner. Be safe out there, and until next time.